In this video, we're going to be looking at how to use GSAP to make an SVG animation like this. Hello, my name is Kevin, and here at my channel we learn how to make the web and how to make it look good while we're at it. This is the final video of my SVG series, and in this video we're going to be looking at how to create some cool animations with GSAP, or the Greensock Animation Platform, which is a JS library which makes it a lot easier to animate things. If you missed the previous videos in this series, I'd strongly recommend you check them out as they look at why we use SVGs, how to code them up, and if you've got more complicated SVGs, what you get when you export the code from your software, and how to clean it up and optimize it. To start things off in this video, I'm just going to stick with CSS Animation using keyframes, but then we're going to recreate it using GSAP so we can really understand how it works. And then we're going to do some more complicated things with GSAP to finally reach what we saw at the start of this video. So to start things off, I've made this SVG in Illustrator, so let's just hit save so we can see that over here. If you're wondering how my browser auto refreshes, I do have a video linked down below in the description so you can check that out. So here's just a really basic SVG. I have cleaned it up a little bit from Illustrator. The only things I've done is added class names to what I have here. So I have my SVG as the class of hamburger on it. I've made it really nice and easy for my view box, so it's just 100 by 100, which makes it a lot easier to use. And then we can come over here and look, and I just have a line 1, line 2, line 3, and they just pretty much stretch across, no fill on them, a black stroke, and that's about it, and a width of 4 on those, so nice and simple. I'll just bring a style tag in here to make my life a little bit easier. If I give my hamburger a background of red, you'll see that it's a lot bigger than the hamburger itself. So I'm starting these at 25 units across, so there's 25, 25, and then these take up 50 total, and there's obviously a lot of empty room on the top and bottom. I'm overdoing it a little bit with the extra space, but because I know in this animation by the time I'm done, I need these to move around a lot. So if this stretches out one way or another, if they're moving up and down or spinning around, I need to have room around it so it doesn't get clipped off. So that's why my view box is a lot bigger than what I'm looking at with my SVG. If you're not too sure what I'm talking about when I talk about my view box, go check out the video on the viewport and the view box that I did where I look at explaining the whole concept there and how those work. So obviously we don't need that anymore. Let's get rid of the red. But I'm going to state, as I mentioned, we're going to do a simple little animation here. So on here, I'm going to do, I want to do a little hover animation. So when I hover on top, it's going to animate. So for that, we can do hamburger hover. So when I hover on top of my hamburger, I want the line 1 that's inside of that to do something. But I don't only want line 1. I actually want to do it to all of my lines here. So I'm just going to copy and paste line 2 and line 3 here. So I'm selecting all 3 of my lines, and then we're going to do something. So just to show you, let's just say we did a transform scale 1.5 or something like that, just so we can see that. Let's save. When I hover on top, we can see now that all of them are getting bigger. Now, it's not what I want to be doing. It's really awkward what's happening, but just to show you what's happening there. So a better way to do it. So what I'm going to do is just create some keyframes here. And so I'm going to do @keyframes. And we're just going to do 3 keyframes. So I'm going to do a 0% keyframe. And I'm going to do a transform, just like we had before. But I'm just going to do a scale X. So it's only going to scale on the X-axis. It's not going to scale on the Y-axis like we had before. And it's probably a bit too big, so we'll go with, well, we'll see what happens with 1.5. So that's good. Then at 50%, we're going to do a transform. Oh, whoops, at 0%, it should be 1. This is where I want scale X to be 1.5. And then I actually want this to go back to what it was at. So we're going to do 100%. And I can just copy this one here, copy, paste. So the one thing I forgot to do was give this a name. So we're going to call this line grow. So what I want to do is animation line grow. Let's do an ease out over 500 milliseconds and see what this looks like. So you can see they sort of shoot out from the side like that. So it's working, but it looks a little weird. So let's just come on here for now and do a transform origin. So where is it transforming from? And let's just say 50%, 50%. So it's going to transform right from the middle. And we can see now that it's just growing like that. So we get a bit more of a thing going on. Now the only problem is they're all doing it at the same time. And what I want is this one, then this one, then this one. So to do that, I can come down here and I can do hamburger, hover, line 1. And for that one, I can do, or not line 1, we already have, line 1's going to go right at the beginning. Then I can do on my line 2, I can do an animation delay. Let's do like 75 milliseconds. And then I'll copy all of that for line 3. But line 3 will get double, so 150 milliseconds. So now when I do it, you can see it's going from the top down to the bottom. So this one's going, there's a delay of 75 milliseconds, then the second one is going, and then there's a delay of 150 milliseconds, and the one on the bottom is firing after that. So I think that looks nice and cool and fun. So that's how you can do it with CSS, and it's not that complicated. For simple animations, you can 100% use keyframes. It keeps you away from having to use a JavaScript dependency, which is always a good thing. And there's a lot of cool and fun stuff you can do with it. You can push this a lot further than what I did with just this. You can do a lot of really cool things. You can probably get to what I'm going to do at the end if you really wanted to. But for now, let's just take all of this and comment it out, because we don't want to be using it. So I'm going to save that, and now we've lost our little animation. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the Greensock website. So let's check this out a little bit. Greensock engaging the internet, and pretty much they have GSAP, the new standard for HTML5 animation. It really is an amazing JavaScript library here. It comes with some really cool plugins also to do drawing along a line. Let's just see. Yeah, the draw one here is really, really cool, and they have a morph one, the morph SVG plugin, which is incredible. I don't want to be worrying about that. I just want to be using their regular old GSAP, which is amazing in its own right. So on their site here, I'm just going to go, and one thing these guys need to do is work on their website, because it's not very responsive. I was looking for this download link right there. So we're going to click on download, and I'm just going to copy their CDN link. This is probably the best bet for you. Now, one thing that's really important with GSAP is there's a few different versions of it. I'm going with the regular robust one here. There's a lightweight version as well, or you can even customize it. So there's something called Tween Light and Tween Max, and Timeline Light and Timeline Max. And these are what we're going to be using. I'm going to be using the max versions of them because I don't have to worry too much about it. Now the file sizes are a lot bigger. You can see 36 KB versus 9 KB, and well, for the timeline, it's not too big of a difference. Because I'm just worried about learning and not so much on anything else, I'm just going with the robust, which is their Tween Max, which just comes with everything included. But depending on your project, you might want to optimize it a little bit and go with something a bit more lightweight once you know exactly what you want to do. But if you're just learning, I would suggest sticking with the robust one. So I'm just going to copy that and close it. And let's add that over here. I'm going to go down and save that so it's in there. And let's go and add in a JavaScript file of our own. So after that, I'm going to make a script tag. And this one, src, will be js / let's just call it hamburger.js for now, and hit save. All right, so with that done, I actually need to create this file because this doesn't exist yet. So I'm just going to come over here on the side, make a new folder called JS in my file. And in there, let's make a new file called hamburger.js. Super. So the very basic way that Tween Max works, or the syntax of it, is something like this. You're always going to start with a Tween Max, or if you're using the Tween Light or the Timeline, depending which one you're using. But you'll put the name of it there. The method is a predefined method that GSAP is giving us. So we're going to explore a few of those shortly. The element, so what is it that you're actually going to be transforming or animating? how long it lasts, and this is always going to be in seconds, and then the vars. So these are the properties that you're going to be changing, the scale, the size, the color, different things like that. These all falls into here. Now for the element, you could do a big long nice selector there, but usually the easiest thing to do is define it first. So I'm gonna just create a const here of a hamburger and have it equal to document.query selector, and it will select my .hamburger. Great. And now what we can do is we can do our tween max. So again, we start with tween max, and then we want to do our method. So the two most basic methods are to and from. I'm going to start with to, and we'll look at from in a second. So I want it to transform or animate to. So now I have to say the first one was my element. So my element will be my hamburger. We want to take 2 seconds. Now it's always in seconds. You don't need to put an S or anything like that, like you might with when you're playing around with CSS. And then what do we want to do? So here we need the vars, or the different properties that we're going to be playing with. So you always put these inside of curly braces, and then you just list out everything you want to do. So just to start with, let's just see if this is working. So I'm going to do an X, and I'm going to put 100 on this. And what that means is translate on the X-axis by 100 pixels. So let's hit save on that, and there you go. As soon as I hit save, you can see that that did that. So I'm going to hit refresh. As soon as the page loads, you can see it starts moving over by 100. The other option we have is from. So if I do from and I hit save, it's going to start here and then go back to where the CSS was dictating it to. So if I hit save on that, you can see now it's moving back that way. Now there is the problem is sometimes you get a flash where it jumps, but now we can see I'm going to refresh. So it's starting from there and going back. So to or from. Cool, yeah? So let's apply this in a more interesting way for our hamburger here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to define all of the different parts of my hamburger to make it a bit easier to select. So I need my line 1. Instead of doing a query selector on my whole document, the line 1 is inside my hamburger, so it makes it a little bit faster to do the query selector this way. And if you're really after performance, query selectors aren't the fastest, but they will get the job done in this case. So I want my line 1, 2, and 3. Now I don't want to be doing this, so let's get rid of that. And the other thing is right now, I don't want, I want to make like a hover event, right? Like we had before. So to do a hover, if I'm using JS here, what I'm going to do is hamburger, and we're going to add an event listener to here. So what the event is going to be is a mouse enter. And one thing to be careful here is not to do a mouse over, because then it's going to keep running as long as my mouse is on top of this. We don't want that to be happening. So with a mouse enter, it's only when the mouse enters that area, not that it, so the animation won't keep firing, or the event listener won't keep firing while my mouse is on top of it. So when that happens, we want something to happen. So to do that, we need to do a function. I'm going to use an arrow function. So to do the arrow function, we do it like this. This is pretty much the same as coming here and writing function and then that, and then opening this, just like that. Because this is empty, I can just do it like that and then put in my arrow function. Or if you want to be lazy, if it's empty like that, you can leave it like this, or you can put an underscore like that to save a keystroke. And then I can still do that. So when I mouse enter, what do we want to do? So let's go back to what we just had, tween max, oops, capital M. So tween max 2. So we're starting in the right place. We want to go somewhere. So I want line 1 over 1 second to, let's do our scale X of 1.5. Now the one thing to learn when you're using GSAP is the properties here. You saw before I used X, it's not transform X, but for scale X, I write scale X like this, and it takes a little bit of hunting and getting used to using the different things here. So before I hit save, we're doing a tween max. We're tweening from this state and we're animating it. We're selecting line 1, so it's only this top one which will animate. The duration is 1 second. And what we're doing is we're doing the scale of 1.5. So let's hit save on that. And now I should be able to go on and we can see it growing out like that. The problem here is it's only one way. Luckily, GSAP also comes with something called timeline max. This lets us link different tweens together. It makes it a little bit easier than getting stuck with something like this. So the easiest way to use the timeline is to create a variable for it. So I'm going to call it TLM, timeline max. So on my timeline max here, what I'm going to do is new timeline max. And for the new timeline max, we want to include the curly braces in here. Now you can define extra stuff in here that sort of set the starting, a few starting parameters for it. We're going to leave it just like this for now to keep it as simple as possible. We're pretty much just saying that our timeline is, we're fresh, we don't have anything going on. The TLM here just makes it a lot easier to use. So instead of doing a tween max here, what we're going to be doing is a new timeline, or we're going to be using our new timeline, so our TLM. So if I hit save on that and I go on here, it's going to look exactly the same. Now what I can do though is I can keep adding to my timeline. So I can do TML2. We can do our line 1 again, 1 second again. But now what we want is the scale X to go back to 1. So when it's finished, it's going to go back to 1. So let's hit save on that. And now when I hover on top, it's going to grow and then shrink back down. So if we look at what we originally did with our CSS, that's pretty much what we had to do here. Here we're defining where we're starting, where we're going, and then what we're coming back to at the 100% point. In this case, we're not defining the starting point. Sometimes you can do that. It depends on the animation that you're doing. But we have our starting point is what it initially is in this case. And then we're saying go to this and then go to this. This makes it a lot like adding our animation frames like we saw, but one nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about percentages. So here I had to figure out, okay, 0, 50%, 100%. What if I wanted to add a new point in here? Well, then I'd have to go and rearrange all of these. If I want to add a new point into here, I can just add something else onto it afterwards or in between. So if I wanted to sort of shrink it down, TML to line 1, 1 second, let's just say, scale X 0.75, hit my save on there, and it's going to grow, it's going to shrink, and then it's going to go back. I don't have to worry about the percentages. It's figuring out all that stuff for me, which is really nice and handy. Not going to keep this one for now. Another thing you can do just to make it a little bit, less keystrokes. I don't actually need this here, or what you'll commonly see is something like this here where they're sort of strung together. So if I hit save on that, it's still working. So what that pretty much is doing, if we were to write it out differently, is stringing it together like this. It just, this could keep going on and on and on and on and stretch across your screen. So to make it a little bit easier, you can hit return, and then we usually just tab it over so we can see where we are. So I'm doing this, and then so this is just, these are all stringing together. If you don't want to keep repeating writing TLM at the start of every line or whatever variable name you've defined. Now obviously the speed of this is really slow and we want to speed that up. So remember, this is in seconds. Let's just fix this and put it up to 0.25 seconds, I should say, and hit save. And when I hover over now, you can see it's nice and fast. So it's shooting out and coming back in. But we have a bit of an issue. Right now we only have the top one animating. I don't want to have to create something like this for every single one of them. That would be annoying, and I'd rather do it just with my regular animations then. Luckily, GSAP makes this really easy with something called Stagger. So we can use Stagger 2, which lets it, the Stagger 2 lets us target many things and animate them all in the same way, but with a stagger or delay between each animation. We can put an array directly in here. So just to give you an idea, the way the stagger works is you'd have like my TLM, stagger 2, and then here you would have an array. So you'd have the array of all the different things you want to be animating. Having the array in here though is a little bit messy. So just like before, I'm going to come into here and make a new array here. Let's just call it lines. And it's just going to be line 1, line 2, line 3. So I'm getting these 3 lines here and putting them all in an array. And now what I can do, so instead of having all of this here, I'm going to delete all of that, and I'm going to do a dot stagger 2. So my stagger 2, the first thing I want to do is what's the array? So my array is lines in this case. I'm selecting my lines constant here, and that happens to be an array, so I can just leave it just like that. So I have my lines. After that, it works just like before. How long is it going to take? 1 second. And what's the scale? Or what's the variable? So I want to do my scale x of 1.5. And then we can add in another variable here, which is what is the delay. So how long between each one of them. So let's just say I do 0.3 seconds and hit save on that. So what that's going to do is it's going to do this animation to line 1. It's going to wait 0.3 seconds, and then it's going to do it to line 2, and then it's going to wait 0.3 seconds, and it's going to do it to line 3. And there you go. You can see that it worked. So let's just speed this up a little bit because it's a little bit slow. So let's say 0.25 again, and I'm going to change my stagger on that. There we go. So that looks better, but we have the same problem before. It's only going in one direction. So there's a cool thing we can do in here called yo-yo. But before we get to yo-yoing, we're going to look at the repeat. So I'm going to do comma in here, and I'm going to do repeat. And let's repeat this 1 time. So you can see I'm doing this all inside of the curly braces here. So the scale is in here, and my repeat is also on here. It's another one of the vars that I can come in here. So I'm going to hit save, and we're going to see when I hover over, it's going to do it twice. Now it's kind of weird when it happens, but let's just do like 5 of them or 4 of them. So you're going to see now it repeats a whole bunch of times. It looks really weird because it's running and then shrinking, but as soon as it's finished shrinking, it's running again. But basically we can tell it how many times do we want to repeat it. So repeat 0 would be do it once, which is the default. But repeat 1 means it's going to do it 2 times. But what I can also add is something called yo-yo. And if I put yo-yo onto true, when it repeats, it's going to do the second one in reverse, just like a yo-yo. So a yo-yo goes down and then it comes back up. So if yo-yo is set to true, that means that my animation will run forwards, and if it's repeating, will run backwards on the repeat. So let's hit save on that, hover over, and now we can see that we're getting that cool thing. And if I bring this up to 3, just to show you, it's going to go back and sort of become really bouncy. And if I did 2, an even number here would be really awkward because it's going to run and then stop at the large size, which isn't what we want. So I'll leave that on 1 for now. Now, to make things more interesting, we can also make this turn into an X when we click on it. But for now, I'm going to turn off the hover here, and just because it's especially going to cause us some problems early on, and we'll come back later and fix this so we can have both the hover and our X little animation. So for this, I'm going to do const, and I'm going to call it toggle menu, but my toggle menu here is going to be another timeline. So new timeline max. The only difference this time is I'm actually going to put a few things in here. The first one I'm going to put in here is paused is true. The reason I'm putting the paused is true in here is, if you remember before, if I had, let's just grab this. If I hit save on this, as soon as my page loads, you can see that it ran. So I hit refresh, we see that it's running there. So if I come into here and I write paused is true, now when I refresh, you can see it's not actually doing anything. It's just there. So this is going to be a little bit handy because it's going to make things a little bit easier to use. I'm just going to undo to get that back inside of there. And the second thing we're going to add in here is reversed. And I'm also going to set this to true. So the reversed here initiates the reverse state, which makes it accessible to use later on. And that's going to be really useful. We'll see that when we get there. And I'll explain it a little bit more. We're going to write this one a little bit differently too, which is why I have the whole pause thing on here. So instead of putting this inside the event listener, I'm just going to write the whole thing out here. So let's just do toggle menu. And I'll come on to a new line because we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff to put on here. So 2. So I'm going to start with line 2. Let's do line 2, 0.125. We want to go pretty fast. And let's just do a scale x of 0. So what that's going to do is just shrink this one away, because if we're crossing these in an x, I don't want to see it. I want this to disappear. Then we can come down and let's think of the next thing we want to do. So basically that's going to slide out of the way. Then I want my line 1 to rotate and then downwards, and I want this one to rotate upwards. So let's check that out. Let's do a line 2. Let's do it the same speed, 1.125. And let's do a rotation. So this is where it's not rotate, it's rotation of 45 degrees. And I don't have to put the degrees in there. I can just write it just like that, which can seem kind of annoying or counterintuitive if it's not something that you're used to. You just have to sort of learn how their thing works. And then line, to line 3, 0.125, and we'll do the same thing. Rotation 45. Now you might be thinking I could do all of this with CSS, and so why would I want to do it like this? Well, you're about to see. Let's get the click event working, and then we'll see how this can be why sometimes this is easier than doing it with the CSS. So hamburger, add event listener. This time I want to be listening for a click. So when we click on it, once again, we'll do a nice little arrow function here and toggle menu. So I'm getting my toggle menu, and we're going to do something a little weird here. We're going to say reversed. And if you've never seen this, I'll explain it in a second. Question mark, toggle menu play, colon, toggle menu reverse. Aha, super. What do we have here? It's a ternary shorthand with JavaScript. It's basically saying, it's sort of like an if statement. So it's saying, is toggle menu reversed? Is this true? So here we can see that it is true. I've turned it on and initiated it over here. So if this is true, then we do this. We play this. So we take this and we play it. If it's not true, we're going to reverse what we have here. So one of them is going to play it and one of them is going to reverse it. And that just means that if it's been played through, we're going to play forwards one time, and then the next time we click on it, because it's been played, it's going to go into this one and it's going to reverse. So let's see how that's going to work. Well, actually, it should work right now. So let's hit save on that. I can come on here and I should be able to click. And whoop, I forgot just here, we want to have play like that. So now I should be able to come over to here, click, and not exactly what I was expecting. But at least we know it's working. So we can see our line is sliding out. So that's this one working fine. Except I did line 2 and line 2. Not too smart of me. This should be line 1. And let's try that again. Good, except this one should be -45. So let's hit save, try that again. There we go. So we can see that they're crossing and then on crossing when I click again. So again, is it true? Yes. Let's play this forwards. Oh, it's not true anymore because it just went through. Okay, now I'm going to do this one instead. So every time I click, it changes from one to the other. Now, obviously, this X is not looking very good. So there's a few things we're probably going to have to do to fix this up. The first problem is this one's rotating from here. So when it rotates down, it's too far, and this one's rotating from here. So on these where I have my rotation, I'm also going to do my transform origin, and this one is the same as in CSS, how it works. So let's just put it right in the middle and put the same thing right on here. So now it's still not a perfect X, obviously. But if I look at this one, when I click, you can see that it is rotating. My mouse is pretty much in the middle, and you can see it's rotating around that. And if I come here and I click on it, you can see it's pretty much rotating on that axis, our axis. And why that's useful is now I can, as that's happening, I can bring it down, and as this is happening, I can bring it up. And then I can have them both pretty much bang in the middle. So when I click, they should be lined up nicely. So to do that, I think what we're going to have to do is going to be on the y-axis, and I'm going to move them by 8. And the reason I'm going to move them by 8 is if we come and look here, my y, the right dead middle is 50. This one is moved up by 8, and this one has been moved down by 8. So this one's 8 pixels off the middle downwards and 8 pixels off the middle upwards. So I think if I come on here and I add a y of 8, and then on this one I add a y of -8, there we go. We get a nice perfect X. So that is nice and cool. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Now, when I do this, though, obviously you've probably noticed that it's doing one animation after the other, because these are all steps in the timeline that we created. So first it's line 2 here, doing its little animation. Then it's going to be line 1, doing this one, and then it's line 3. So we get boom, 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 all 3 of them going individually. But what if I wanted them all to be at the same time? Well, this is where things start to get interesting. So one way we can do that is if I come all the way to here, or right after my vars here, and I do (0), and I can add that to all of them. Let's just turn off the word wrap for a second. So if I come to here and here, (0), and I hit save, what this is doing is they're all firing at the same time now. So you can see my line is shrinking away and my X is crossing at the same time. So that's getting more interesting right away. So what the 0 here is doing is it's a delay. How long is the delay? So from the start of my animation, there's a delay of 0 on all of them. So they're all firing at the same time. But what if I wanted this middle line to move out of the way first, and then I want it to turn into an X? Well, one way to do it is I can change my delay. So I know this is taking 0.125 seconds. So I could change this delay to be 0.125 and then 0.125. So remember, even though this one is after this one, this delay is always from the beginning of the animation. So if I click, you can see now that's sliding. As soon as this is done, my X kicks in. One of the problems with this, though, is if I came and I changed this to 0.5 for some reason, obviously those numbers aren't relevant anymore. So my line is still sliding while the other animation is going on, which you might not want. One way you can do it instead is, let's actually just do this in slow motion to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to do that as 1 second. So if I hit save now, we're going to see that it's still going, it's still going, it's still going. So there is a delay, but it's really, really short right now. Instead of writing it like this, though, if I turn this into a string and I write plus equals, and I'm going to leave this one like this, and I'm going to leave this one like this, just so we can see the difference between the two. And I'm going to hit save on that. And you see the difference there? So this plus equals, which is on my top line. So if I click, it starts sliding. And then once that finishes, this one's going. So if I write it this way, it means there's a delay of 0.125 after the previous step. Now the problem is I can't then add that onto this one because, well, how is that going to work? It's going to be delaying an extra 0.125 from here because it's always looking at the previous step. Now one thing is I could just take the delay off of here completely and we will get something like that. What I find a lot more intuitive anyway than using these types of things are using labels. A label lets me give that part of an animation a name. more or less. So here what we can do is add in a few different names. So what I'm going to do is do this one, I'm going to call it cross, and I'm going to take the delay off of this because I don't really need it anymore. And on this one, I'm going to write in cross and hit save. So what this is doing is it's giving, I've created a label for a part of my animation. So if I come and I click here, it's going to do that first, but then both of those are going to happen at exactly the same time, and they're happening as soon as that previous step was finished. The reason they're both firing at the same time is this is finishing, it's getting to my cross, so it's going to look for, I could have 100 different pieces of things being animated. It's going to look for all the ones called cross, and it's going to animate all of those at the same time. So it does that, it gets to my cross, everything that's been labeled with cross then fires. Another thing you can do is you can build delays into these two. So not really the most realistic example, but I could do plus equals 1 on here. So now it's going to do this, cross is going to run, and then 1 second after cross runs, this next one is going to run. So if you want delays based on something, you can do that as well, which can be really handy. Don't really want that for the moment though, so let's take that off. But now we sort of have this working. Let's just speed this up because it's way too slow. And let's fix this so I stop getting some errors there. Okay. So this is working, but now I don't have my hover animation on here anymore, and that's sort of a bummer to me. Now, to show you why I don't have my hover animation on here anymore, let's turn it back on. And now, so it's going to work here, and that's fine. I can hover and hover, but if I click, and I have my X, and now I hover, well, we get this craziness going on, and I definitely don't want that. Maybe you like it, but I don't like it. So I don't want that to be able to happen. So there is something we can do, though, to stop that from happening. So I'm actually, to stop this from happening, I'm going to come back down to my click listener here. And on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on my hamburger class list, I want to toggle a class, so JS, and I'm going to call it X. Maybe not the best. People might think I'm thinking of JSX, but the JS part here is just to say that this class is for JavaScript purposes only. So if somebody sees it in the code, don't try and find it in the CSS because it's only here for JavaScript purposes. And the X is because, well, this is turning into an X. So what this is doing is it's finding my hamburger. So it's finding my hamburger class. When we click, it's going to go to the class list and it's going to toggle JSX. What toggle means is if this class is already there, take it away. And if it's not there, add it. So let's go and look at that in action. So I have my hamburger right here. So you can see the class is hamburger. And now if I click on it, oh, I got to save over here to make things actually work. So I have my hamburger. Now if I actually click on it, we have hamburger JSX. And if I come and click on it again, that's been removed. And now I'm back to my hamburger. So we can see it going on and off every time I click, which is perfect. And I know it's working. Now I could rework this a little bit, but let's just come up to here and we can leave this alone for now. I won't change this and update it so it's a little bit more like that one. We'll just leave this like this for now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on here and say if hamburger class list contains JSX. So if my hamburger class has the JSX class, that means that this is opened. And if that's opened, I don't want my hover to work anymore. So if it's open, we're going to return. So what return means is just get out of here. We're finished. It doesn't matter if there's anything else going on in this function or anywhere else or wherever we are. You hit return, you escape. You're done. That function quits. So we're not doing anything. So now if I save this, that means now my hover still works. If I click, now my hover no longer works. It's saying that, oh, it has this, I'm returning, I'm getting out of here, and it's returning before it gets to this line, so this is never running. So it's not doing anything. Now I can click and go back, and now my hover is working again. So we can get best of both worlds. Everything's working really well, but but nothing looks quite right. And eases are a great way to make things look more natural and less robotic. Another awesome thing with GSAP is not only do they make eases really easy to do, they also provide us with a really nice site to visualize how they're going to look and a wider selection of defaults than you get with CSS. So if you just Google GSAP Ease, you'll get their Ease Visualizer. And the Ease Visualizer is a really nice tool because you can click on things and it's going to visualize how the animation happens. So you have these crazy ones, but it's showing you the timeline and it's showing you sort of how the thing would animate along that, which is really handy, and it's nice to have a nice visual like that. And it's also, you can choose ease in, out, you know, the different ones, because that's going to change how a lot of these work. One thing you'll notice here in the bottom, they're giving you the example. So here they're just using a tween light, but here they're doing their graph 2.5 seconds ease. So they're doing ease back. So you can see the back, ease in out. So back dot ease in out. You could leave it just there. You don't have to add this config to it. So this is optional. But you can come in to the config and play around with these numbers. So let's just make that a 4, and you can see it's a lot more extreme. Or I can do it as a 1, and it's going back down to the basic value. So the config is an optional one. You can see, for example, on this bounce one, they don't have the config in there. So you'll see it in some of them, and some of them, the configs will be quite complicated. And you can also do custom ones where you can kind of go crazy, and in the custom one you can actually click and drag and make your own thing. So let's just say we're on Power 3 and I click on custom, and now I can change this, and then I can copy what is here and use it on in my file. So it can be really easy to get some cool little eases in there. I think for now I'm just going to go with like a Power 2 on an ease out. I think, we're going to use an ease out so it slows down near the end, but they're going to be a lot faster than that. So let's go and do that on here. Actually, let's just fix this because it's not the right size anymore. Okay, so I should be able to come right to here, put a comma, and then I can do my ease. And my ease is going to be a Power 2, I think I said, and we'll do an ease out. And hit save on that. And you know what? The problem with this, I'm going to do an ease in out. The main reason is the animation's running forwards, but then it's also reversing. So yeah, it just sort of smooths everything out a little bit like that than what we had before. So it looks a little bit nicer. So now we can do the same thing for our X, just to smooth things out a little bit. So to do that, the easiest thing to do, we need to do it on all of these. I don't really need it on my line moving out, but I just want to put it on my crosses here. So just right here after both of those, I'm just control clicking on that. If you're on a Mac, you can command click, and we're going to do an ease, Power 2, ease, in, out. I think we'll do the same that we did there. So Power 2 dot ease in out, hit save on that. And then we can come over here and click, and what if I just did? I'm going to do an ease in on one of them, just so I can see if there's a bit of a difference, or if I don't even see anything. I'm going to slow those down just a tad, just to see. And I think we'll stick with our in and out on that now that we've slowed that down a little bit, so we can just see it running a little more. Awesome. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now, one really nice thing about building animations with GSAP is how easy they are to modify and add steps to. So with CSS animations, adding new steps can be a fight with keyframes, and then when you want to do more complicated things, it can be really kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Let's take this and just completely change it up and do something completely different. What I want to do instead of when I click, instead of them crossing like that, I want them to slide together into the middle, so they're sort of smushing down, and then cross. Now to do that, I don't actually need that one to get out of the way, but we could still have it get out of the way. And one thing that can make it really easy to do something like this, actually, because I have this on here, but I want to make sure that they're landing right in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rotation here off of these two. Just to start with, I'm going to hit save, and I just want to see what that does. Cool, so they just come and stick together. That's exactly what I was hoping they would do. So that moves out of the way, they come and stick together like that. That's cool. So then once this happens, I want them to cross. So I'm actually going to come here and let's turn on word wrap. This is more of a slide than a cross now. So I'm going to change the label I have on here to slide. And let's go and add some more stuff to here. So now we can do a line. We can get our line 1 again, say 0.25 seconds. And now what we can do is my rotation. So now we can go rotation 45, and we'll do the ease on this one as well. So ease will be our power to ease in out. And on this one, I'm going to call this one cross, because now they're crossing. So let's hit save just to make sure that that's working. Oops, I'm missing my closing bracket there. Try that again, save and click. Perfect, look at that. And then that one turns, so now I can do the exact same thing here, but for line 3. So the rotation here will just be a -45, hit save. Oop, too many semicolons, hit save. Come to here. It doesn't like something I did. Oh, line 3 needs to be capitalized. There we go. And look at that. So they smush together and then it turns into the X. And that is nice and dandy. Now this is one of the places where I'm adding to it, so I'm not worrying about keyframes. I can just keep adding and adding and adding. And I'm just making it longer, but I can also come back into the middle now. So let's say here they've smushed together. I've done my slide. Now what I could do is add another thing in here too, but instead I'm going to do my whole hamburger. I think this one's going to have to be a bit longer. It's going to look crazy, so I'm going to do 0.5 seconds on it. Now let's do a rotation of 360 degrees, and let's do an ease on this one too. Let's go with like a power 4. Yeah, power 4 just to make it a little bit more extreme. And we'll do once again an ease in out. I forgot my colon there. And save. And let's see what happens. So, cool. And backwards. Ah, very nice. And I think the last thing I'm going to do here, just right now, when I do my, I think one last thing I'm going to do is right now, I don't really like my hover thing being that they're growing out the side like that. I want them to grow from the middle instead. And to make sure they're growing really from the middle, I can do transform origin. I could probably do the same thing on this, to be honest, but what I'm going to do is something that's a little bit different. And what it's called is, just to show you that it exists, SVG origin. And I can do the same thing, except I'm not going to put percentages. I'm just going to do 50-50. And what this is doing is it's looking at SVG coordinates. And this is really, really handy because you're setting the origin of the animations and everything according to SVG coordinates. And this can be really, really handy. So in this case, I'm just finding the middle of my SVG. So let's hit save on that and see what happens. So there you go. Now it's growing from the middle of my SVG instead of growing from the side that it was growing on before. So that's a nice little like touch we can add to it. And you can see by setting the SVG origin to the center, it's also, this is affecting everything. So now this scale X has actually been affected by that, because when I do it, it's shrinking down in the middle, which is fine and dandy, and I'm really happy with how that looks. As you see here, it's so easy to change, modify, and play with, and it's really a lot of fun, and this is just scratching the surface of the things you can do with GSAP. I found it took some time to get used to it and playing around with it and on their documentation a little bit, but man, it's fun to use. And really, that's just the basics of it. It's really incredible the things people are doing with this. But for this video, that is it, the basics of GSAP. In the comments, some people have been asking for more advanced things like SVG, type with SVG and more advanced animations than what I've done here. Maybe one day I'll make an intermediate or more advanced series, but for now, this one is a wrap. But for this series, we've seen why we want to use SVGs, how to write them, how to create them, how to organize them, how to optimize them, and now we've seen how to animate them as well. Many thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and commenting away on my videos. You're all amazing. And of course, a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting me through Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.